This episode is brought to you by Sterling Soap Company. How often do you think about your soap? Well, if you answered, not much, maybe you should. You see, a lot of what passes for soap in stores is technically not soap, according to the FDA's definition. It's full of lab-created chemicals and detergents because, well, it's cheaper to make. Now, what if you could buy natural soap made from natural ingredients like tallow, palm oil, coconut oil, and scented with essential oils, and for just a little more than you'd pay for grocery store soap? Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne, there's a product and a scent for just about everybody. Check them out for yourself at sterlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. Are you a hockey fan? Then you'll love Eric Zweig's new book, Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2. It's a treasure trove of untold tales, bizarre incidents, and captivating trivia that will leave even the most devoted puckhead astounded. The intense rivalries, epic showdowns, and historic clashes that shaped the NHL's early years, it's all in there. Zweig uncovers the true stories that helped shape the sport, ensuring that you will never look at hockey the same way again. Check out Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2 on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. And welcome back to This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network. You can find more info and more podcasts at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey, this is Steve White, your humble podcast host, back for another edition of This Dish. It's July 25th, and on this day in 1908, it was one of the weirdest endings to an Olympic race. And of course, there was controversy. So this actually started back on the 23rd of July, but the controversial end was on this day 116 years ago. The Olympics were being held in London, and one thing to keep in mind is at this time, relations between the U.S. and Great Britain were not like they are today. Without getting too heavily into the politics, this was during the era known as the Great Rapprochement. America was flexing its muscles, taking a larger role on the world stage. The Brits weren't so keen on that, and so things were a little frosty between the two nations. Here at the Olympics, that manifested itself in a couple of ways. First, the Brits intentionally did not display the American flag or anything recognizing the U.S.'s existence anywhere during the opening ceremonies. When the American flag bearer passed by the King's grandstand, he intentionally did not lower his flag in deference to the King. The 1908 Olympics would become known as the Battle of Shepherd's Bush, which is where the Olympic Stadium was located. So understand that first. Now, second, rules differed a little bit between the U.S. and Great Britain on how certain events were run, and that will come up in a few moments. So this is the 400-meter final, again on the 23rd. There were only 4 runners competing, 3 Americans, John Taylor, William Robbins, and John Carpenter, along with Englishman Wyndham Halswell. Halswell was considered the favorite after setting the world record in the event during the semifinals. But 3 Americans against 1 Brit, there was concern among the London newspapers that the dirty Americans would conspire against Halswell. When the gun sounded, Taylor got off to a horrible start and fell behind, leaving it to be a 3-man race. Coming into the finishing stretch, Robbins had the lead. Carpenter, in second, made a move to pass his teammate, as did Halswell. Carpenter passed Robbins, but the corner flag man raised his flag, signaling that a foul had been committed. Now, men at the finish line broke the tape, and they voided the race finish. Carpenter did cross the line first. Robbins was second, followed by Halswell, and then in a distant fourth, it was Taylor. The British rules officials said that the American Carpenter had impeded the Brit Halswell by running diagonally across his path when he tried to make the pass. It was a legal move in U.S. track circles, but by British standards, it was illegal. Carpenter argued that Halswell had plenty of room, he just wasn't fast enough. The race results were voided, and Carpenter was disqualified. And then the race was scheduled to be run again on this day in 1908 with Taylor, Robbins, and Halswell. But the Americans refused to acknowledge the ruling, and they refused to line up to start the race again on this day. And instead, and the only time it's ever happened at the Olympics, Halswell ran uncontested for the gold medal and what's referred to as a walkover. Sticking with the Olympics in 1908, a little later in the day, after the one-man 400-meter parade, the American John Taylor, and just a quick refresher, that's the guy who finished a distant fourth on the 23rd. Well, on this day, Taylor competed in a track medley, similar to what you see in swimming where specialists swim different strokes. This event was on the track and featured men running different distances. It doesn't exist today in track and field, but it was back in 1908. So Taylor, as he did 2 days earlier, ran the 400-meter portion of the medley, along with William Hamilton, Nate Cartmel, and Mel Shepherd. The Americans won the track medley relay. Now, why is this significant? Well, John Taylor was a black American and became the first black athlete to win a gold medal for the U.S. at the Olympics. The relay team became the first integrated team to win a medal at the Olympics. Sadly, Taylor died of typhoid just 5 months after his return from London. And in 1952, at the Olympic men's 3,000-meter steeplechase event in Helsinki, Finland, it was American runner and FBI agent Horace Ashenfelter pulling off a surprise win. So, one thing to know politically, this is in the early years of the Cold War between the East and the West. This was the first Olympics that the Soviet Union had actually sent athletes to since 1912. They'd been invited to participate in the 1948 Olympics in London, but only sent coaches to observe other athletes. At the 1952 Olympics, the Soviets demanded that their athletes, along with other so-called Iron Curtain nations, to be segregated from the other Western nations. They obviously didn't want an exchange of ideas or the possibility of any of their athletes defecting. So, on to what happened on this day in the 3,000-meter steeplechase final. The favorite was the Russian Vladimir Kazantsev. Kazantsev had beaten the world's best 5,000-meter runner, Emil Zatopek, in the lead-up to the Olympics. Kazantsev had actually set a new Olympic record in his qualifying heat race for the 3,000-meter steeplechase, and he held the world record in the event. An American had not won a distance race longer than 800 meters since the 1908 Olympics. Kazantsev got off to a great start, and he set the pace early. Ashenfelter had a horrible start, and he fell behind early. It wasn't until the final lap that he actually started to make up some ground on the field, and by the time they got to the final water jump, Ashenfelter was shoulder to shoulder with the Russian. Now, one technique Ashenfelter used that he borrowed from the Finnish runners was stepping on top of the water jump hurdle and then leaping off of it, and that's the technique that you see used today by steeplechase runners. Others would hurdle it like any other hurdle, and when Kazantsev faltered in the water pit with his conventional hurdle, Ashenfelter took off and he sprinted to the gold medal. Because of his dramatic come-from-behind win, seemingly lurking in the shadows only to surprise his prey with his surge, many said that since he was an FBI man, he was the first American spy to be chased by a Russian. On this day in 1999, Lance Armstrong rode into Paris as the champion of the Tour de France, becoming only the second American athlete to win the grueling 21-stage race. Close to 500,000 cycling fans lined the Champs-Élysées in what was considered a ceremonial ride to the line. Nobody attacked the GC leader, though there would be a race to the line for the sprinters. When Armstrong finished several minutes behind stage winner Robbie McEwen, he was on top of the GC standings 7 minutes and 37 seconds ahead of Switzerland's Alex Zülle. Armstrong's win was made even more incredible due to his recovery from cancer less than 3 years prior. He had ridden in the road race in the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, but he did not feel right in that race, and it would be a few more months until he found out that he had testicular cancer that had spread to his brain and lungs. His chance of survival was about 30%, but he did beat it with chemo treatments, and then he worked his way back to fitness. The big transformation he made was going from a road racer like in the Spring Classics or the Olympics, and he turned himself into a grand tour rider with emphasis on time trialing and climbing big mountains in a hurry. And yes, there was the blood doping. The 7 tours that he eventually won have all been vacated. Now, say what you will about Armstrong, and I will admit I was a Lance fanboy at the start of the 21st century, and when he finally admitted his cheating, it was tough to deal with. But despite what he did, you can't take these 3 things away from him. He had an enormous impact on cancer research through cancer funding raised through his Livestrong Foundation. He had a huge impact on bike sales in the U.S. for more than a decade, and he had a huge effect on the fitness boom that has taken place over the last 25 years, and I'm certainly one of those who have benefited from that. And despite the fact that the win he achieved on this day 25 years ago is no longer etched in the record books, the impact of what he did can still be felt. On this day in 1956, Roberto Clemente did something that no major leaguer did before or since. Clemente's Pittsburgh Pirates were playing at home against the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs led 8-5, heading into the bottom of the 9th inning. Hank Foyles drew a walk, Bill Verdon singled, and Dick Cole walked to load the bases for Clemente. Clemente was known to swing at just about anything. He was kind of known for being a good bad ball hitter. Chicago's Jim Brosnan was brought on in relief, and his first pitch would have been a ball, but Clemente swung at it, and he hit it well. It sailed over the head of Jeff King in left field, and it rolled to the wall, and then it caromed toward center field. Foyles, Verdon, and Cole all scored easily, but Clemente ran through the stop sign at third base, and he chugged for home. The relay was a little off the mark, and Clemente slid into home, but he missed the plate. When he leaned back to touch home, he was safe and became the only player to end a game with an inside-the-park grand slam home run. The term we use today is walk-off homer, but that term had not come into baseball's lexicon just yet. It would be another 32 years before reliever Dennis Eckersley coined the phrase to indicate the sad walk that a pitcher who had just lost the game had to make back to the dugout. And to the golf course we go now. On this day in 2009, it was Mark Calcavecchia birdieing 9 consecutive holes to set a new PGA Tour record. He was playing in the second round of the RBC Canadian Open at Glen Abbey. It wasn't just his putter that was hot. His mid and short irons were also working really well. His 9 straight birdie putts were all within 15 feet. He finished the day with a 65, but his ride on the birdie train did not equate to bringing home the win. He finished in a tie for 8th. The previous record of 8 straight birdies had been set by Bob Golby in 1961 and equaled by 5 other golfers before Calc bested it on this day. And on this day in 1980, everybody's favorite golf movie and furry little golf course destroying gopher debuted in theaters, Caddyshack. The movie was pitched by Harold Ramis, Doug Kenny, and Brian Doyle Murray as Animal House on a golf course, and it immediately got the green light. Of course, it starred Ted Knight, Rodney Dangerfield, Bill and Brian Doyle Murray, Chevy Chase, and Michael O'Keefe, who played Danny Noonan. Interesting fact, the Baby Ruth in the pool scene was based on an actual prank that Brian Doyle Murray and his brother Bill played on their unsuspecting classmates back in high school. Time now for today's non-sports fun fact. The world's first computer is recognized as the 1945 ENIAC, but the world came incredibly close to having its first computer in the 1820s. An inventor named Charles Babbage designed what he called the difference engine, but it was just too large to construct even though he tried. After 10 years, he scrapped his first project and tried to construct a smaller one, but he died before its completion. In 1985, scientists wanted to see if it would actually work. By the time they completed the project, based on Babbage's original drawings, 6 years later, they found it functioned flawlessly and exactly as Babbage intended. solving complex calculations. That's all I've got for you today. Let's do it all again tomorrow on This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.